Over the past few months, we have had several flight attendants ask questions to the Seniority Integration Committee. One of those questions is, what are we doing to protect the premium Delta flying? And the other question is, what are we doing to prevent the Northwest flight attendants from transferring into our bases and flying our premium trips? And at this time, we'd like to take the opportunity to address those issues with you. Many of you have heard the term fence when it comes to integrations and mergers. And a fence in our case would be a restriction placed on the company to prevent flight attendants from using their seniority to either, one, transfer into a certain base or to fly premium trips. A fence temporarily inhibits the company from completely integrating the operation. Fences are imposed when one group would be put at an unfair disadvantage without that protection.
We've taken a very hard look at this issue because we know everyone is feeling anxious about how the merger will affect flying and job security.
Remember, after the flight attendant seniority group has been merged, we still have to be cross-trained. Once this happens, the company can fully integrate our schedules. It is unlikely that any of the cross-training will be completed before the year of 2010. There's been some debate about whether the company will have to wait until they receive approval for the single operating certificate. Even if Delta could merge the flight attendants prior to receiving the single operating certificate, we will have to be cross-trained. It will take some time to cross-train over 20,000 flight attendants. Secondly, there will not be a system rebid. We all know the size of any base may change because of attrition or a reduction or an increase in flying. If positions are added, they will be filled through the normal base transfer process. So there will be no mass movement of flight attendants transferring from base to base.
We understand that there's some overlapping bases such as Los Angeles, New York, and Boston, and we have looked at each of these bases when analyzing whether we should propose any fences. What we've discovered is that there are several obstacles in convincing either management or our Northwest counterparts to agree to a fence, and ultimately, in the event that we would go to arbitration, it would be extremely difficult to convince an arbitrator to impose one.
We cannot predict where the company will move current flying or place new flying. We all know that flying is not owned by any base. Both carriers are bringing premium international flying and considerable domestic flying to the merged operation. As the company gains the synergies through the transaction, we expect to grow. Though nothing is certain in our industry, we have already seen examples of growth with the announcements of new routes to Sydney and Sao Paulo from Los Angeles. We have been mindful to the fact that we do not want to create rules that will actually work against the Delta flight attendants. For example, there are Delta flight attendants who would like to transfer into Northwest bases, such as Minneapolis and Memphis. Many have also expressed an interest in flying Northwest premium Asian routes. If we were to block the Northwest flight attendants from transferring into pre-merger Delta bases, they would likely object and demand reciprocal restrictions on their bases and flying. It is important to know that we may have a difficult time convincing an arbitrator that a fence is fair.
For example, if we try to fence the Orlando base and the Florida AFPs, and the number of positions in these bases increase, the Northwest flight attendants could object by arguing the increased flying in these bases were previously flown by Northwest flight attendants.
Also, putting up a fence might not actually accomplish anything. Let's take a look at New York, for example. New York is the most junior base in the pre-merger Delta system, meaning that more new hires are sent here right out of training. There was a concern that a mass number of more senior Northwest flight attendants would transfer into the New York base due to the premium Delta flying. This potentially would push the junior flight attendants further down the base list. If we put up a fence and say that only Delta flight attendants can bid into the base for a period of time, and no Delta flight attendants bid for the open positions, then the positions would go to the Northwest flight attendants anyway. And what we need to remember is that there needs to be open positions for any transfers to occur.
Our hope is this discussion clarifies why the committee will not propose any restrictions on the operation once it has been fully integrated.